Have you ever looked at your bank accounts in December and thought, wait, how did we even get here? Like, what happened? Honestly, it's like the last few months of the year just blur together. You have extra spending, last minute plans, and somehow it feels like we're just winging it. But what if we could actually end the year with financial clarity instead of chaos? Hi, I'm Leona. Welcome back to the channel. This is episode 3, so the final video of our finished year strong series. Today we're talking about resetting our finances because we all want to go into the new year feeling clear, confident, and aligned, right? And how we end this year really matters. So let's start strong. If we really want to end this year with financial clarity, right, we need to really retrain how our brain even responds to money. So neuroscientifically, our spending patterns often rely on the basal ganglia, right? So the region that stores routines and repeated behaviors. So that's where automatic routines basically live. So if we've spent all year checking out when finances feel overwhelming, the brain will really just default to that. But here's the good news, right? This part of the brain is trainable and it basically learns best through repetition. So that means if we want clarity, we don't even need to wait for January. We can just start now with consistent cues. So for example, we could even spend like 2 minutes opening like our banking apps and just check like, where is our money even going? No, for real, honestly, because I know sometimes we try to avoid it, right? But these micro habits create a new script in our brain, which basically says, I handle money. Psychologically, this taps into self-perception theory. So when we act like someone who's financially grounded, our brain just starts to really believe it. It's not about being perfect, absolutely not. It's more about practicing the identity. So as we close the year, we're not just avoiding chaos, we're training in calm. Because financial clarity isn't a personality trait, it's a process we practice. So to finish strong, we teach our brain that actually money is safe to look at. The more familiar it becomes, the less fear it holds. The next is set a monthly money clarity hour. If we want to finish the year strong financially, one of the best things we can do is set aside just 1 hour each month for financial clarity. So honestly, it doesn't even need to be fancy, right? Just a calm moment with a notebook, our budget app, and maybe like a couple of our bank statements. So here's the neuroscience behind it. When we basically pause to reflect on money decisions, especially ones where it involves priorities, right, we engage the anterior cingulate cortex, which basically helps us notice errors, learn from experience, and basically just adjust future behavior. So that's the part of the brain involved in monitoring outcomes, learning from past behavior, and also adjusting for the future. So in simple terms, it's basically what helps us make better choices over time. So this hour isn't about judging ourselves, absolutely not judging ourselves for spending. It's more about just noticing, where's our money even going? What expenses are coming up? Like, what essentials do we actually need right now and what can wait? So even just like reviewing our subscriptions or realigning our categories, for example, just helps bring like scattered finances back into focus. We can even use this hour to plan for seasonal priorities, for example, like gifts, travels, dinners, birthdays, giving. So instead of cutting those out, we just center them. So that way we're not reacting week to week, we're moving with calm and conviction. So psychologically, this basically builds what's known as a self-regulation loop. So the more often we revisit behavior, like for example, reviewing our finances, the more natural it just becomes to really make small, consistent improvements. So we don't have to track every single penny. We just need to build the habit of checking in once in a while. So when we carve out time to really just reconnect with our money, even just once a month, we just stop drifting and start directing. So that 1 hour can really just set the tone for the rest of the month. Okay, so here's a surprisingly powerful technique, and that's pausing for a while before you actually buy something. And just ask yourself, hold on, what is this helping me move forward towards? Do I really need it and what's going on here? So in cognitive neuroscience, this basically activates the area called the orbital frontal cortex. So the brain region that compares short-term rewards with long-term outcomes and basically helps us regulate emotional decisions. So basically, we shift from impulse to intention. And when that moment becomes a habit, we start noticing patterns. So where our money leaks, for example, and where it lands with purpose. So this doesn't mean we necessarily overthink every single item we buy. It just means we build a pause. So maybe we're buying that coffee, for example, because we're low on energy and connection, or maybe that checkout scroll that we keep doing was more about comfort and not actually needing it. The 2-second pause, or however long you want to pause for, can basically just give us a window to pivot once we're more aware of what's going on. Psychologically, this is tied to something called implementation intentions, which I've said in quite a few videos now. But when we mentally rehearse decisions beforehand, we're more likely to follow through with aligned choices. So that micro check-in becomes a macro shift over time. And again, honestly, this isn't even about guilt. It's about clarity. We're reminding our brain again that we're the ones driving the ship, right? Not the algorithm, not the advert, not the impulse, just us choosing with a little more peace. So ultimately, what I'm trying to say at this point is even a short mental pause can really rewire how we spend. Okay, so this one's a game changer, especially as the year wraps up. Every transaction we make either gives us energy or drains it. So some behavioral scientists refer to this as emotional carryover. So the lingering emotional trace left after financial decisions is the remaining mood pretty much that follows how we use our money. So here's the cognitive bit, right? When we feel regret, shame, or stress after spending, the insula, which is the brain's discomfort tracker, pretty much lights up. But when we spend in line with our values, for example, the brain's reward pathways respond a lot more sustainably when aligned with internal values, which pretty much leads to lasting emotional satisfaction. So let's turn this into a test. For example, after each purchase, big or small, we can ask ourselves, hold on, did that give me energy or did it take it away from me? So it's not about moralizing the situation. It's just more about self-awareness. So a thoughtful dinner with friends might cost more than, for example, a haul on random beauty buys, but one leaves us richer. That's the shift. So psychologically through this, we're building something that's called emotional granularity, right? So the ability to really label and understand subtle feelings. So that helps us make sharper financial decisions and avoid patterns that just leaves us feeling over it. So something we could do is just looking at last month's spending or previous months and just note 3 things that made us feel energized, peaceful, or proud, for example. Then we can ask ourselves, hold on, how can we do more of that? So when we understand the energy behind our spending, we can really just start using money in a way that strengthens us. Okay, so let's move on. Next, we can actually try potentially a financial fast, right? So we only actually spend on essentials, things we don't need. And sometimes, I'll speak for myself, sometimes I don't need things I don't. But honestly, no, this isn't about restriction, it's about clarity, right? So when we step back for just 2 days, for example, we interrupt the dopamine cycle that drives reward seeking. The dopamine, the brain's motivator, basically rises most during anticipation. So when we reduce the constant cues to spend, right, our reward system isn't overloaded and we start to regain control over what truly actually satisfies us. So on a psychological level, this fast creates space. We observe our cravings instead of reacting to them. We realize most purchases aren't about the items themselves. They're literally about emotions, habits, or escape. So that insight pretty much just creates awareness of our own patterns, which I think is actually seriously needed for long-term change. So we could ask actually, what makes me feel grounded? What am I avoiding with this purchase urge? Right? Maybe even write a list of non-financial things that brings peace to your life. So that could be walk, prayer, music, stillness. If we're faith-led, this is a moment to ask God for financial discernment and a spirit of peace. So we can really just repeat this before payday, holiday seasons, or any time money just feels noisy for whatever reason. Because a pause isn't punishment. It really isn't. So a short spending break doesn't deprive us. It can really just give us space to remember what truly even fills us. Okay, so let's acknowledge that most of us sometimes run on financial autopilot, right? The habits we don't even question anymore. This is me. This is actually me. These aren't always bad, but they often operate like beneath the surface, right? So the basal ganglia, a deep brain structure, basically helps store routines we've often repeated before and just makes them automatic to save energy. So it stores routines as shortcuts, so the brain doesn't have to use extra energy. But here's the thing, those shortcuts aren't always aligned with our goals. So to finish the year strong, what we could do is gently interrupt those defaults. So maybe that means like putting a post-it on our card holder that says pause, or leaving a browser tab open with our budget instead of our favorite online store, for example. The brain doesn't change with one decision, it changes with consistent friction. So this friction helps pretty much create what psychologists call choice awareness. So the more we notice our habits, the more likely we are to redirect them. Not with shame, not with guilt, but just with intention. So one idea that could work well is like swapping the default. So instead of automatic spending, we could set a default pause, but that alone pretty much starts to shift how the brain predicts and behaves. So ultimately, small disruptions make space for new patterns, right? And when those patterns support our financial well-being, they help us finish a lot stronger than we started. Okay, so let's unpack, right? Sometimes we avoid looking at our finances, not because we're lazy, but because we could be scared of what we'll find. So we think if we don't check, maybe things aren't that bad. No. That avoidance actually can just keep our stress response activated, especially when uncertainty is involved, right? So research shows the brain often finds uncertainty more distressing than a no negative. So that's because ambiguity basically keeps our threat system on standby, which is not good. So particularly in the amygdala, which processes perceived danger and emotional salience, right? But here's the shift. When we directly face our numbers, even briefly, we activate the prefrontal cortex. So that's the part of the brain that helps us with regulating emotions, planning, and just responding calmly. So it doesn't mean we enjoy the process right away, but it stops the emotional cycle of avoidance. So one of the kindest things we can do is basically rebuild a calm relationship with our numbers. So this doesn't mean, for example, sitting down for 6 hours and looking at a spreadsheet and auditing. It could just mean opening our banking app and asking, okay, what's one thing I did right this month? That question can really just anchor the moment in self-compassion, not shame. Do you know what? We can also pray and ask the Lord to help us steward our finances a bit better. So what I'm really trying to say here is that sometimes avoidance can just feed anxiety, but gentle honesty can rewire our brain to face money with calmness and courage. So also, if you're ready to like rebuild your financial calm in a grounded way and you need a bit of help, I've created a free 5-day financial reset guide. It's in the description box, so feel free to help yourself. Okay, so next is use the dopamine loop to fund your goals. What is she talking about? Let's unpack. So dopamine isn't just a reward chemical, it's the anticipation chemical too. So it motivates us to take action based on what we expect will feel good. So that means we can actually design our financial habits to trigger more motivation. So let's say we want to save for something, right? Like a trip, a holiday, an emergency fund, whatever. We can build a simple visual tracker and update it regularly, right? So every time we color in a square or log a small win, our brain gets a dopamine boost, not because we've reached a goal. No. But because we're tracking progress, right? So psychologists call this the goal gradient effect, which is a pattern where motivation rises as we see ourselves getting closer to the finish line. So the more visible our progress is, the more likely we are to stick with the habit. So we can even add like a mini reward to the process just to, spice things up a bit. There's something aligned with our values. So for example, every time we hit a savings checkpoint, we might decide to watch one of our favorite films or, just take like a really nice walk. Nothing major, but just something the brain starts to associate with follow through. This rewires the reward loop, right, around financial discipline. So it doesn't feel like sacrifice, but momentum. So ultimately, progress creates pleasure, and when saving feels good, we don't just dream about financial freedom anymore. We move towards it. All right, so just like we need a bedtime routine, right, to help the brain wind down after a long day, we need cues that help us log off from financial stress too. Otherwise, we basically carry over our money worries into our evenings, relationships, and sleep, which is not good. The psychologists basically describe this using the Zeigarnik effect, and I've said this before, but it's the brain's tendency to keep our unresolved tasks active in our mind, right, which can quietly feel stressed. So if we don't give the brain closure, it keeps the topic open like a browser tab and it just won't close. So that's why a small financial checkout cue can really just make such a big difference. So here's a simple example, right? So like once a week, we could spend like 10 minutes just reviewing our spending and then write down one thing we're proud of, one small thing that, okay, we could shift next week. Then we can also log off. So no spiraling, no overthinking. This gives the brain a sense of completion, right? And it trains the nervous system to stop associating money with tension. So if we live with other people, this could even be something we all do together, right? So it could be like a quiet moment where we reflect, plan, then move on. No drama, just literally peace, check in, and all in rhythm. But over time, these cues just lower financial anxiety and improve our emotional well-being, especially at the end of the year when money conversations can feel a bit heavy sometimes. So closure calms the brain. Even a 5-minute checkout routine can really just turn financial stress into quiet strength. And finally, as we wrap up the year, it's easy to focus on what we haven't achieved financially, right? There's power in really choosing gratitude instead, not just spiritually, but neurologically. Let me unpack. So gratitude activates brain regions linked to perspective taking and emotional regulation, right, including the famous prefrontal cortex and areas within the default mode network. So helping us shift from scarcity to sufficiency, which basically helps provide financial peace. So even if our budget isn't where we hoped, we can reflect on what we did steward well this year. Did we stay generous? Did we cut back somewhere? Did we avoid a major impulse purchase? Every small decision really adds up. If faith is part of your life, this can be a chance just to say, God, you know what? Thank you for even giving me the ability to like have money this year and like looking after it. And if not, we can still pause with gratitude, because really naming progress helps our mind shift from survival to intention. Gratitude just sharpens clarity. It lets us close the year with contentment and carry that peace into whatever comes next. So what I hope that you take from this video is this: financial clarity isn't about getting it all right all the time. It's about really reconnecting with your values, creating small resets and moving forward with confidence. We don't need perfect systems to finish strong. We just need rhythms that reflect the person we're becoming. I really hope you found this 3-part series useful, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.